Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're going to be taking you on a bit of a high-flying journey.
Yeah.
We're going to explore the world of drones.
A technology that's rapidly changing our lives in ways we're only beginning to understand.
Right.
Yeah, we're going to examine this technology from all angles.
From all angles, we've got some pretty interesting sources.
Absolutely.
We're going to be looking at official statements from both the U.S. and EU.
Okay.
We have a pretty thought-provoking podcast episode transcript.
Oh, right.
Which really digs into some of the ethical dilemmas.
Right.
And then we have a recent news article straight from the Department of Defense.
Okay. And to give you a sense of the scale, there are already over 1 million registered drones in the U.S. alone, with thousands taking to the skies.
Oh, wow.
Every day.
Every single day.
As that number continues to grow, you can imagine.
Oh, yeah.
The ripple effects across industries and communities.
It's kind of mind-boggling to think about, right?
It is.
I mean, we're not just talking about, like, hobbyists flying drones in the park.
No.
These machines are now used for
all sorts of things.
Everything.
Package delivery.
Agriculture.
Emergency response.
Architecture and engineering.
Law enforcement.
I
mean, the list goes on and on.
The list, yeah.
And that's what makes this deep dive so crucial. I mean, drones are no longer a futuristic concept.
Right.
They're a present-day reality.
Yeah.
With the potential to reshape our world in some really profound ways.
But as we kind of delve deeper into the sources, we started to see that, drones are kind of like a double-edged sword.
They are.
Right. They offer this incredible promise, but they also raise some serious concerns.
Yeah.
So why don't we start with one that's probably on everyone's mind, which is privacy.
Yeah, privacy and security.
Privacy and security.
I think the podcast transcript we're looking at uses a very relatable anecdote to kind of illustrate this point. Imagine a drone hovering in your backyard.
Right.
Potentially equipped with a camera. I mean, it's unsettling.
It is.
Right.
Yeah.
It challenges our traditional notions of personal space.
Yeah.
And it raises questions about, who has the right to access the airspace above our property.
Absolutely. And it's not just about feeling uncomfortable.
No.
Right. There are genuine cybersecurity risks to consider.
That's right.
I mean, drones are just as vulnerable to hacking as our smartphones.
As our computers.
Or computers, right. And if someone with malicious intent gains control of a drone,
right.
I mean, the consequences could be pretty significant.
Think about it. A hacked drone could be used for surveillance.
Oh, yeah.
Theft.
Right.
Or even to disrupt critical infrastructure.
Yeah.
And as drone technology advances, these risks...
they're just going to get worse.
They're only going to become more pronounced.
That's a pretty sobering thought.
It is.
And then there's the potential for noise pollution.
Sure.
I remember the podcast transcript kind of painted a pretty dystopian picture of urban areas just constantly buzzing with drones. And it made me think, is that the future that we want?
It's a valid concern, especially as drone deliveries become more commonplace.
Right.
Imagine the cumulative noise from, hundreds or even thousands of delivery drones operating in a densely populated area. I mean, it would be a significant shift.
Sure.
In the soundscape of our cities, and it could have a real impact on people's health and well-being.
Speaking of impacts, the podcast also raises an intriguing question about property rights.
Yeah.
Who owns the airspace above your house?
Right.
Is it a free-for-all?
Is it?
Or are there limits to where drones can operate?
It's a gray area legally.
Yeah.
And it's something that courts are still grappling with.
Right.
But it's a question we can't ignore.
No.
As drone use becomes more widespread.
For example, if you're promised drone delivery, are you implicitly agreeing to cede some of your property rights to allow for that service?
It's a trade-off.
It's a trade-off we'll all have to consider.
That's right.
But it's not just individuals who are concerned about drones. The Department of Defense is also taking this technology
very seriously,
especially when it comes to what they call drone incursions.
Yeah, drone incursions are essentially unauthorized drone flights over sensitive areas, like military bases or government facilities. Yeah. And the DoD is making it clear that they're not taking any chances. Right. They've even developed a new counter-drone strategy to address this emerging threat.
In the DoD article that we have, they emphasize that they investigate every report of a drone incursion thoroughly. And Major General Ryder is quoted as saying, "We take all of those, meaning those reports, seriously."
Right.
And they're deploying resources.
That's right.
To specific installations.
Yeah.
Like Picatinny Arsenal and the Naval Weapons Station Earl.
Right.
To enhance security.
To enhance security. It's interesting to see how the U.S. government is primarily focused on the security threats posed by drones. Right. Now, let's shift our focus across the Atlantic. Where the European Union is taking a somewhat different approach.
So from what I understand, the EU is considered like a global leader in drone regulation.
Absolutely.
Yeah. They've established.
I mean, they've established a single set of rules that governs over 1.6 million registered drone operators.
Across all 27 member states.
Across all 27 member states.
That's right. The EU has taken a more, I guess you could say, proactive.
And comprehensive approach to drone regulation, focusing on safety and security from the very beginning. And they work closely with national aviation authorities in each country to oversee drone operations. Their system is quite different from the US's more reactive approach.
It's fascinating to compare how different, governments are grappling with the challenges of drone technology.
Right.
But let's zoom out for a moment and consider the broader societal implications. What does the rise of drones mean for our communities?
Yeah.
And for us as individuals?
That's where things get really interesting. Yeah. The podcast transcript we've been looking at dives deep into these questions. And it raises some really important points about the potential for drones to exacerbate existing inequality.
Can you elaborate on that? I'm curious to hear more about how drones and inequality intersect.
Well, imagine a future where wealthier communities can afford to create drone-free zones. Essentially banning drones from their airspace to preserve, peace and quiet.
Gotcha.
Meanwhile, lower income areas might be subjected to constant drone traffic, noise pollution, even surveillance.
That's a pretty disturbing thought.
It is.
It creates like a sort of drone divide.
It does.
That kind of mirrors existing socioeconomic
disparities. Exactly.
All
and this division could extend beyond, just noise and privacy. Think about access to drone-powered services. If drone delivery becomes the norm, but those services are primarily concentrated in affluent areas, it could further marginalize communities that are already underserved.
So it seems like there's a real risk that drones could deepen the digital divide.
Absolutely.
And create like a two-tiered society where some benefit disproportionately.
While others are left behind. Precisely. And then there's the question of corporate power. As companies like Amazon and Google invest heavily in drone technology, they're gaining increasing control over our airspace.
For sure.
What does that mean for our freedom, our privacy, our autonomy?
The podcast transcript paints a rather bleak picture of a future dominated by corporate interests, where convenience and profit trump individual rights.
It's not just a hypothetical concern. We've already seen companies push the boundaries when it comes to data collection and surveillance.
Absolutely.
Imagine a future where corporations have access to vast amounts of data gathered by drones flying over our cities and towns. I mean, it raises serious questions about who controls that information and how it's used.
It sounds like we're at a crossroads.
We are.
We can either passively accept a future where corporations and governments kind of dictate how drones are used, or we can demand a more democratic an equitable approach.
I agree. Yeah. We need to be proactive in shaping the future of drone technology.
Right.
That means demanding clear regulations that prioritize safety, privacy, environmental protection. And it means holding companies accountable for their actions.
But it's not just about top-down regulation.
No.
Right. Individual choices.
Absolutely.
Also matter if we're constantly opting for instant drone deliveries, even when it's not essential.
Yeah.
We're contributing to the very problems that we're concerned about.
That's right.
Noise pollution, privacy risks.
Corporate overreach.
Corporate overreach.
That's a crucial point. Yeah. Each of us has a role to play in shaping the drone landscape. We need to ask ourselves, do we really need that next day delivery?
Yep.
Or can we wait a little longer for a more, sustainable option?
Right.
It's about weighing convenience against the potential downsides.
Right.
And deciding what kind of future we want to create.
It's a powerful reminder that we're not just, passive consumers of technology. Yeah. We're active participants.
That's right.
In shaping its evolution.
Absolutely. And it's important to remember that drones are just tools.
Right.
They can be used for good or for ill, depending on the intentions of those who control them.
I mean, we've seen drones used for incredible things like search and rescue operations, disaster relief efforts, even to monitor environmental changes. It's inspiring to see how this technology can be harnessed for the greater good.
And there's so much potential for future innovation.
Right.
I mean, drones could revolutionize healthcare, transportation, agriculture.
Yeah.
The possibilities are endless.
The possibilities are endless.
But to unlock that potential responsibly,
right,
we need to have these conversations now.
Right.
We need to think critically about the ethical implications of drone technology and work together to ensure that it benefits all of humanity.
It's a challenge, but it's also an incredible opportunity.
It is.
The decisions we make today will shape the drone-powered world of tomorrow.
Well said, but I think it's important to acknowledge that these decisions aren't just about, logic and reason.
Right.
Our feelings about drones are also influenced by our, cultural values and personal experiences.
That's a great point. Someone who lives in a rural area might have a very different perspective on drone noise than someone living in a densely populated city.
Absolutely. And our cultural backgrounds can also shape our views on things like surveillance and corporate power.
Right.
What might be considered acceptable in one culture could be seen as intrusive in another.
Absolutely.
Exactly. And that's why it's so crucial to have these conversations across different communities and cultures.
Right.
Finding common ground on drone regulation and usage will require, open dialogue and a willingness to understand diverse perspectives. It's about recognizing that there's no one-size-fits-all solution.
It's about, moving beyond simplistic debates about, good versus bad and engaging in more nuanced conversations.
That's right.
That acknowledge the complexity of the issues.
So complex.
We need to recognize that drones are neither inherently
right.
good nor inherently bad.
Right.
They're tools, and their impact depends entirely on how we choose to use them.
That's right. And those conversations need to involve everyone.
Okay.
Policymakers, industry leaders, researchers, and most importantly, everyday citizens. We all have a stake
Absolutely
in the future of drone technology.
Well, folks, that wraps up part 2
all right.
of our drone deep dives.
Let's go.
We've explored some of the ethical and societal implications of this rapidly evolving technology. We've talked about the potential for drones to exacerbate inequality, the growing power of corporations in our airspace, and the need for responsible regulation and individual action. We've covered a lot of ground in our deep dive into the world of drones.
Yeah.
Exploring both the incredible potential and the valid concerns they raise.
Absolutely.
So now in this final part, I'm curious to hear more about the global efforts to regulate this rapidly evolving technology.
It's a complex landscape with different regions taking different approaches. Okay.
But one thing is clear. Governments around the world are recognizing that drones can't be ignored.
Right.
They're actively working to develop regulations that strike a balance between fostering innovation and protecting the public interest.
So earlier you mentioned that the European Union is often considered a leader in drone regulation.
They are. Yeah. They're seen as kind of the gold standard.
Okay.
In many ways.
So can you tell us a little bit more about their approach and what makes it so unique?
Certainly. Mm-hmm. The EU has implemented a comprehensive block-wide regulatory framework for drones.
Okay.
It covers everything,
like
from registration and licensing to operational limitations and safety standards.
Wow.
One of the key aspects of it is that it's a single unified set of rules.
Okay.
That applies to all 27 member states.
Gotcha.
This harmonized approach helps to ensure, consistency and clarity across borders. So instead of each country having its own separate regulations.
Right.
Everybody in the EU is playing by the same rules.
That's the idea.
When it comes to drones.
Exactly.
That sounds like a huge step.
Is.
Towards creating a safer and more predictable drone ecosystem.
That's the goal.
What are some of the specific rules they've put in place?
Well, for instance, they've established different categories for drones.
Okay.
Based on their weight and operational characteristics.
Okay.
Lighter drones.
Right.
Often used recreationally.
Yeah.
Have fewer restrictions, while heavier drones intended for commercial operations.
Gotcha.
Face more stringent requirements.
Okay.
Including, mandatory registration.
Right.
Pilot licensing and operational limitations.
It seems like they're trying to tailor the regulations to the level of risk involved.
That's the idea.
Which makes sense. But what about the U.S.? How does our approach to drone regulation compare to the EU's?
The U.S. has adopted a somewhat different model.
Okay.
While we do have a federal agency, the Federal Aviation Administration, or FAA,
right,
responsible for overseeing drone operations,
right,
much of the regulatory authority is delegated to state and local governments.
So it's a more decentralized approach.
It is.
But does that create challenges when it comes to consistency and enforcement?
It certainly can. The patchwork of state and local laws can be confusing for drone operators, especially those operating across state lines.
Right.
And it can also make, enforcement more challenging.
It sounds like there are pros and cons to both approaches.
Absolutely.
Right. The EU system seems more streamlined and consistent.
Mm-hmm.
But the U.S. model allows for more flexibility and local control.
That's right. It's a trade-off. And each system reflects the political and cultural context of its region. But one area where both the U.S. and the EU are aligned is the need to address the security risks posed by drones.
Right. We talked earlier about drone incursions and the steps the Department of Defense is taking to mitigate those threats, particularly around sensitive military installations.
Right.
But what about the broader issue of drone security? What's being done to prevent drones from being hacked or misused?
That's a critical area of focus. Both governments and private companies are investing heavily in developing, counter drone technologies.
Like what?
Including, detection systems, jamming devices,
right?
Even drone catching drone.
Like something out of a sci-fi movie.
It's a little bit Wild West out there.
It highlights just how seriously this issue is being taken.
It does.
It's not just about preventing physical harm. It's also about protecting sensitive data and ensuring that drones are used responsibly and ethically.
Absolutely. As drone technology continues to advance, security measures will need to keep pace.
Right.
And that will require ongoing collaboration between, governments, industry, and research institutions.
But let's not forget that drones also have the potential to be a force for good in the world.
Yeah.
I mean, we've already seen them being used for incredible things, from delivering medical supplies to remote areas to helping farmers monitor their crops more efficiently.
And the possibilities are only just beginning to be explored.
Right.
Imagine a future where drones are routinely used to inspect bridges and power lines, to assist in search and rescue operations, to deliver packages sustainably, and to monitor environmental changes in real time.
It's an exciting vision of the future.
It is.
But it's one that will require careful planning, responsible regulation, and ongoing dialogue to ensure that the benefits of drone technology are shared widely and equitably.
I couldn't agree more. As we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with a sense of cautious optimism.
Okay.
Drones are powerful tools.
Yeah.
And like any tool,
right,
they can be used for good or for ill.
So the future of drones isn't predetermined.
No.
It depends on the choices we make today. Individually and collectively.
Right.
It depends on the regulations we put in place, the technologies we develop, and the values we prioritize.
So stay informed.
Right.
Stay engaged.
Yeah.
And remember that we all have a role to play in shaping the drone-powered world of tomorrow.
That's a perfect note to end on. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into the fascinating world of drones. Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep asking questions.